what would be the most powerful words that you could use, words to describe the difference between what Russia was when you came and what it is now?
I remember the seminarian students came up to me and said, are you still planning on going to Russia? I said, well, yeah, why? This was October 1993. Yeltsin just had tanks fire on the White House. There's a civil war. You're going to go there. So I called the guys up. They were still in America. And they said, what do you think? I said, well, what do you think? They said, well, are you going to go? I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go. And they said, okay, we'll go with you. So we flew over. And we flew in, and immediately martial law was declared. You couldn't fly out again, and I didn't feel stuck here. I just thought, we'll see what happens, So that was my introduction to Russia. I called up a priest and I said, I've come to the conclusion that the Orthodoxy is the historic church, the true church. I'm not a part of it. I'm not happy about this. He thought I meant I'm not happy that I'm not a part of the church. I mean, I'm not happy to find out it's true. I didn't want it to know true. This is going to upset my whole life, and I don't want that. So for me, just in my case, only speaking for myself, it was a matter of integrity. I had to follow what I believed. I went looking for the truth, believed I found it. Now what am I going to do?
Hi, everyone. My name is Stan. Welcome to A Russian Opinion. Today I have Father Serafim. He's from the U.S. He's from California. And we are filming here in Moscow. He's been living here for a very long time. So please, like, subscribe, comment, go to the description. There's going to be a whole bunch of links to my other channels. Take a look. If you like, subscribe. Of course, that's how you can support my channel. Father Serafim, thank you very much for giving me the time to just have a regular conversation with you. So could you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Well, as you said, I'm originally from California, born and raised there. Though eventually moved overseas, lived in Scotland for a number of years. My two oldest children were born in Scotland, UK citizenship, but they now live in Washington State, where I also lived for a number of years with my wife and children. My youngest son lives here, married to a Russian, and we have a new granddaughter. So I have 3 children altogether. I have 10 grandchildren back in the States and 1 granddaughter here. And I've been serving here at this church, just officially attached to it. I'm not the rector of the parish. Atec Ioan is the rector, and Atec Samuel serves here. Now we have another priest also, Atec Andrei. And so with the Patriarch's blessing, I'm attached to the parish, and I serve here. And also do an English liturgy on Saturdays in another parish in the center, and have made my home here.
Do you have a lot of English speakers that come to you?
Well, I wouldn't say a lot. That's relative. We have English speakers both here in this parish and obviously in the one where I serve in English. But it's a mix of we have Americans, Canadians, Japanese. Here we have, in addition to those, we have someone from South Africa, from Australia. But then we also have a number of Russians who love to speak English, and which is one of the reasons why I don't speak Russian so well, is because they want to speak English with me. And my wife is here, and she speaks English with him. And so it's a good group both here and in the other parish as well.
Mm-hmm. But you do speak Russian. We just had a very brief exchange just recently.
A little bit, like I said to you in Russian. I try to speak. I try to understand.
Mm.
I keep at it.
Okay.
I started too late, with serious Russian studies, in my opinion. Give me another 10 years, and maybe I'll be able to explain how to do my funeral service by then.
Okay. And were you always Orthodox, or did you convert to Orthodoxy?
I converted to Orthodoxy. I converted to Christ when I was a student at university in California. And my family's heritage is Scottish Presbyterian. And I was kind of like this with that. And I ended up in the Presbyterian denomination for a while, served in the Church of Scotland, which is Presbyterian, as well, after I finished my studies in Scotland. but then left the Presbyterian denomination, became an independent Protestant, started a parish in California. And it was while I was there in California, in that parish, that I was confronted with orthodoxy. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't want to become Orthodox, quite frankly. I was kind of upset that this had come across my path.
Okay, obviously, yeah, you had your own path, and then all of a sudden something comes up and gives you a different plan. But why did you choose to become Orthodox? What made you switch?
Being confronted with the truth of the Orthodox faith, I did not, as I say, I did not want to become Orthodox. The two of my best friends, also pastors, ministers, had begun looking into Orthodoxy, which made me angry. And I also had some parishioners of mine who were looking into Orthodoxy. And it's one thing to tell my parishioners, dead end street, don't go there. I can't tell my peers, we studied together in seminary, did our doctorates together. If I said, dead end street, don't go there, they'd just laugh, but they're going to investigate for themselves, So I realized I need to really investigate this seriously myself, get my ducks in a row, and then tell them why it's wrong, tell them why it's false. And I always say, you see how successful I was. It didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work.
What in Orthodoxy, and the reason why I ask these questions is I'm truly curious because I'm Orthodox, but I'm not religious. So I've never had the chance to ask someone who made a switch from one religion to another, just to find out like why, what exactly made you, what besides the motivation of having other people do it or something, it confronting you, but internally, what made you actually switch?
Well, there was a battle that was going on at the time internally, spiritually, you might say. There were things that drew me to Orthodoxy, the spirituality, I could say, the spiritual life. I was very much drawn to that. So my heart was pulling me in that direction, but my head was saying, no way, are you kidding me? I had theological objections, and I thought I had historical objections that were valid. And I began meeting with Orthodox clergy and laymen and making them present their case, And the way I go about trying to discover the truth, if I'm meeting with some others, is I'm going to bring my best arguments for my position. I expect you to do the same. And let's see what's standing afterwards, And time and time and time again, I would come with my objections, and I would hear what they had to say, and I would leave saying, I think that's right. Let me do some more investigation. And I would do some more study of the history. And I finally came to the conclusion that, yes, I was reading the fathers, what we call the fathers of the church, is ancient documents. In some cases, I was reading, there's a collection of documents called the Teaching of the Apostles. And these are letters that were written by the disciples of some of the 12 apostles, like who received their understanding of God and the faith from Jesus, the 12 apostles. And so you have someone like the Apostle John, who had disciples, and he passed that on to them. And then those disciples wrote about it in this collection of documents. And I started reading those, and I thought, this looks like an Orthodox church. It doesn't look like my parish. As a Protestant, if you came to my parish and looked at it, you would ask, well, where's the bishop? Where's the priest? Where's the deacon? Why aren't you having Holy Communion at the heart of your service and in each of your liturgies? We can have a liturgy. And I realized that if one of the apostles or St. Paul walked in to my parish, if you walked into an Orthodox church, you would understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that church does not look like anything he ever worshipped in. Now that the church is free, we've been able to ornament it and expand it. But he would understand it. He would understand the altar. He would understand what's on the altar. He would understand what we were doing in our liturgy, because we inherited that liturgy from Judaism. But if he had walked into my Protestant parish, he was, what the heck is this? What are these people doing? What do they think they're doing? This is a Christian, didn't look anything. You wouldn't have understood what we were doing. And I was confronted with that. And so I came to the conclusion that this really is the historic church born at Pentecost. and spread throughout the world, and I'm not a part of it, and I need to be a part of it. I called up a priest and I said, I've come to the conclusion that the Orthodoxy is the historic church, the true church. I'm not a part of it. I'm not happy about this. He thought I meant I'm not happy that I'm not a part of the church. I mean, I'm not happy to find out it's true. I didn't want it to know true. This is going to upset my whole life, and I don't want that. So for me, just in my case, only speaking for myself, it was a matter of integrity. I had to follow what I believed. I went looking for the truth, believed I found it. Now what am I going to do? Am I going to say, no, never mind, I'm comfortable staying in this, I don't want the truth? And I've met such people.
Of course.
But I couldn't do that. I had to follow what I believed to be true. Otherwise, how do I ever, for example, give a sermon again to anyone in my Protestant church and expect them to follow me or believe me or to lend credibility to what I'm saying if I'm not willing to follow the truth when I see it? So that forced my hand. That forced me to convert, become Orthodox.
I mean, you could have, obviously, looking back, there was a number of things that you could have done. But you could have, for example, gone to Greece, because it's also Orthodox over there. But you decided to come to Russia in the 90s when things were very, very difficult, to say the least. What made you choose Russia? And when you did come here, like, what did you feel? I mean, I remember it through a child's eyes. You were an adult. You must have seen all the crazy stuff that was going around. So, yeah, why Russia? Why not somewhere else? And how'd you feel about it?
It's interesting you mentioned you could go to Greece instead of Russia. I did both. I first went to Romania, and this was 1993. I had a lot of travel mileage. I had to use it up before December. So I was brand new Orthodox, and I'm going to go to Romania. I had some friends there. I'd been there several times before. And then a couple of guys said, would you take us to Russia? And I said, yeah, okay, why not? I'd never been to Russia, but always wanted to go. So this was 93. So I flew to Romania and I spent a couple of weeks there. And then I remember the seminarian students came up to me and said, are you still planning on going to Russia? I said, well, yeah, why? This was October 1993. Yeltsin just had tanks fire on the White House. There's a civil war. You're going to go there. So I called the guys up. They were still in America. And they said, what do you think? I said, well, what do you think? They said, well, are you going to go? I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go. And they said, okay, we'll go with you. So we flew over. And we flew in, and immediately martial law was declared. You couldn't fly out again, and I didn't feel stuck here. I just thought, we'll see what happens, So that was my introduction to Russia. But, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but I wanted to, for my sake and for my family's sake, I wanted to live in an environment that was naturally Orthodox. I was a convert, and I wanted to, I guess, get rid of some of my convert baggage, you could say. I wanted to immerse myself. And it wasn't practical at that time to think about living with my family, young children living in Romania they hadn't even begun to recover from Ceausescu's communism. Wasn't realistic. I didn't know anything about trying to bring them to Russia, but that didn't seem a possibility either. So we moved to Greece, and we lived in Greece for a year. And then for the next 12 years, I went back almost every summer, and sometimes with my family, sometimes on my own, and we would stay there. And so that was the way we immersed ourselves in the Orthodox faith. So I had a great love for the church in Greece and the church in Romania. But I came to Russia that first time in 93, and it was a wild time. It was crazy. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We didn't get civil war going to break out. There were a lot of places we couldn't travel because we couldn't find anybody to take us. I remember we wanted to go to Dibyevo Monastery, and we asked a fellow if he would drive us, and his eyes got big. He said, I don't go outside the city limits at night. There's bandits out there,
Yeah.
And this was a new experience for us. While we were here one morning, we got up to the news that a Western businessman had stepped outside the hospital and been shot down. And his body was laying there, and pictures in the newspaper. And it was like the Wild West in a way. Or one of my friends who was here at the time said, like Chicago during the days of Al Capone, the mafia was pretty much in control of the city at that time. So there was not a lot of law and order at the time, a lot of poverty, uh, a lot of people begging for enough money just to put some food on the table that night. It was a real sad time as well. That really went to my heart. But I fell in love with the place, the churches, the monasteries, the architecture, the history. I've always loved history. There's just so much here, you can never plumb the depths. So I left, went back to the States. I came back the next year. I think I came back again the year after that, bringing people over, people who wanted to go and knew I'd been. Can you take me? Yeah, okay, let's go. And just kind of went like that. Brought my oldest son over. He turned 15 here. And I was telling you before, I don't think he appreciated it at the time, but he has since. And eventually brought my youngest son over. I think he turned 18 here. So it came back a number of times to the 90s and to the 2000s, and then finally moved permanently over here.
Well, what would be the most powerful words that you could use, words to describe the difference between what Russia was when you came and what it is now?
In the 90s, Russia was impoverished. It was a place of lawlessness and disorder, I would say. It was very dangerous. It could be a very dangerous place to be. It was not able to stand on its own. The American government had come in and in a sense was trying to colonize the place. The CIA was able to set up their office inside the archives building, for example, and they had free run of the place and thought that they were going to have that forever here. The big change came from an unexpected source. I don't think anybody really thought when Putin was put forward as president that anything was going to be different. I know the American government just assumed he'd be just another Yeltsin, just a younger version and a sober version. We just go, yeah, keep doing what we want him to do. And that turned out not to be the case. He was a patriot. He loves his country, dedicated to it, and determined. He was determined to. Also, people in the West don't realize it, and if you told them, I'm not sure they would believe it, but the man was trained as a lawyer, and he has a PhD in jurisprudence, and he thinks like a lawyer. He wants things to be legal. So what he does, and someone will say, but he invaded Ukraine. Well, he did it on the basis of the UN Charter, and they should look into that. He made sure that what Russia did was legal according to the UN documents, according to international law, not international rules-based order that change anytime America wants it to change, but according to international law, he acted legally. Anyway, he came to power with the determination to raise the country back up again, to clean up the country, to restore its dignity, to reform the courts. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but he's done an awful lot of work last 20 years or so. There's an amazing difference. Now, when I first came, we had to be very careful of our circumstances. Where are we? What's going on around us? Keep your wits about you. Circumstantial awareness, as my sister always likes to say, you want to know what's going on. And you're kind of like this because at any moment, I had friends who were attacked here, beaten severely, robbed. That was not uncommon at all. And now we don't even think about that sort of thing. I've told people before, my wife, who doesn't speak any Russian, but gets around better than I do, knows the city better than I do. She's off on the metro and comes back at night, walking by herself in the dark, and it's not the least bit worried. We would never do that in Los Angeles or Seattle or New York or lots of cities. She would never do that, be too afraid to do that. Wouldn't be safe, wouldn't be wise. Here, we're not worried about drive-by shootings. We're not worried about being mugged. In the years I've lived here, I think I've only heard rumors of one mugging at some place in the general area some years ago. That's it. It's just the city is extremely safe, and it's amazing that a city so large. This is a world-class city. I can't remember population. What is it, around 13 million or something?
13, 14, depending on how you count and who you count and
Yeah.
how big you count
Right.
territory, right?
Yeah. The larger metropolitan area, so to speak. It's an amazingly safe city. You can't find a comparable situation in the States like this. So we feel very safe here. It's in some ways, it's like the conditions are like raising your family in the 50s in terms of values. Conservative, traditional Christian values. The government supports that. The government backs that. So it's a world of difference. And the economy is very strong, whereas it was very poor. When I came here the first time, you didn't use rubles. Nobody used rubles, We used dollars, we used Deutschmarks, we used British pounds. So it's a world of difference.
Well, I had an interesting question. Usually, like, as I was writing here, trying not to get completely wet and then trying to get as dry as possible, I usually think about the kinds of questions I want to ask, and I try not to write as many down as possible because then it's kind of like a stale interview. Here we're having a discussion, and I'm learning a lot of interesting things. And I have this question for you because you mentioned family values. And unfortunately, what I've seen is many different countries, West, sometimes in the East as well, that have gone the other route. And I myself, I have conservative values. I do believe in the traditional family, but I wanted your take on it. I mean, maybe it's a dumb question to ask considering you're an Orthodox priest, but why are family traditional values so important to the overall health of a country and a society?
Perhaps the easiest thing to do is just look at what's taking place in Western countries. Perhaps people saw the opening show of the Olympics, the last Summer Games. This much of it kind of a demonic display, a sacrilegious display of Holy Communion, and very much an anti-Christian display. That's been Europe's path. As they rewrite their history, they write Christianity out of it. They don't want any mention in the EU documents. And so what has happened to Europe? Europe used to be a wonderful place. I went there many, many times to Germany, to France, to Switzerland. Beautiful countries, wonderful countries. They were safe when I was there. And now we're looking at places where it's very unsafe for a lot of different reasons, but especially if you're someone who is a traditional person with conservative values. Same thing in America. We saw what happened, particularly during the Biden administration, how crazy, how things were turned upside down, and the disintegration of the family. You have a kind of mental illness that has taken over society where, think about it, you'll see Congress interviewing individuals or congressional representatives being interviewed by others. What's the definition of a woman?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what a woman is? And they just and they're scared to death to say anything. They're scared to death to even approach that question because they know that they're going to be attacked on either side, no matter what they say. But the idea that you can't answer about that you can't say this is a man, this is a woman, for fear, it's crazy. And the younger generation, unfortunately, has lost its way because of that. Children, my grandchildren's age, that generation, think of how many, not being able to find their niche in life, as it were, have been sucked into this mentally ill concept of life where they speak of themselves as being transgenders. And science is thrown out the window. It's really interesting that years ago, Christians would be accused of not following the science.
And now it's the opposite, right?
Right. Now they're accused because you follow the science and people don't want to know what the science is. And even in our medical, I remember reading not that long ago, the UCLA medical faculty, they can no longer use in their articles, in their lectures, they can't speak about a woman being pregnant or a woman during her pregnancy, that sort of thing. They have to say a childbearing person,
which is ridiculous.
Exactly. It's ridiculous, and it's a denial of science. So the world is turned upside down, and as a result, families begin to disintegrate. And look what's happening in Europe with the demographics. The battle is already over. France is not going to consist of ethnic French individuals. It's probably going to be Muslims in your lifetime. And you can say the same for other European countries as well. The demographics already show that the battle has been lost. The war has been lost because they're not reproducing, because they don't believe in the family anymore, because they've been told lies for decades and decades. More important for a woman to have a job and not to bear children. Better for a married couple not to have children because they have more money to spend on themselves. And what a dead end. And not just a dead end for that couple, but a dead end for society. So traditional values are traditional for a reason. There's a reason they are the tradition, and this is not the tradition that we're seeing today.
It's unfortunate that by the time the young family realizes that they want kids, biology has already come knocking at the door.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's difficult to do so. It really is unfortunate when you think about it. So I completely understand, but I do have this one question as well. I have many questions, to be honest with you. And it's good to have questions, right? So in countries, in the States, we'll take the States, for example, someone who is under 21 aren't allowed to buy alcohol, for example. Someone who's under 25 is not allowed to rent a car. There's a lot of restrictions based on people's age. You can't do certain things because you're not an adult yet. Your brain hasn't formed yet, etc., etc. However, when it comes to surgeries for kids to change their sex, when it comes to that community reading books in churches and in libraries, they seem to say, well, that's not going to influence the kids at all. Why is it the case that everywhere else there is a law to ensure that children are safe and they're not doing something they're not supposed to until they're adults, except for that? Why is that the area where kids will definitely not be brainwashed? Why do you think that is?
Well, in my opinion, there is a globalist agenda, and part of that globalist agenda is a depopulation agenda, and it's been quite successful, unfortunately. And so if you can convince a generation of people that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, you're going to do away with a lot of a future generation. There'll be far fewer children if you're successful in that. But they're also, if you can convince them of that, then you can convince them of many other things as well. They can be easily manipulated to follow that world agenda. You can convince them that it's really a good thing to live in 15-minute cities and not be allowed outside unless you have the right QR code and the right credit system and enough credits in that system. I mean, there are a lot of reasons. And by the way, that's not the only thing about indoctrinating the youth. It's okay for these children under 21 to make decisions about surgery. Maybe even some of them are arguing that a 12-year-old can make such a decision.
Even younger sometimes.
Yeah. But there is another area where they'll allow that. They won't allow you to drink alcohol at 21 or vote till you're 21 or rent a car, but they'll allow you to die in their wars too.
Yes.
So another way to depopulate. Part of the globalist agenda, part of people who don't care about people, part of people who have no love in their hearts, part of people who aren't vested in the future of anyone other than themselves.
Why do you think, in your opinion, because there are, and you brought this up, again, I didn't write anything down, 15-minute cities, technically speaking, ever since the USSR, we've been constructing, and we still live in 10-minute neighborhoods where everything is available within walking distance: your school, your kindergarten, your barber shop, et cetera, groceries. I mean, yeah, you're not fenced in, you're not gated in by technology, but the concept is pretty much the same. And I understand that the 15-minute cities concept in the UK is radically different, because there they actually don't want you to be outside of their 15-minute cities. But essentially, we're living here and we're living in 10-minute neighborhoods. So what is the radical different part between the 15-minute cities that you were talking about and the 10-minute neighborhoods that we all live in and enjoy?
Or you just put your finger on it. Um, the goal in the West of those 15-minute cities includes, well, the goal is control of the population. And so part of those 15-minute cities includes the idea that you can't get out of those 15-minute cities unless you have a legitimate reason in their eyes and the eyes of the authorities to let you out. You'll need some kind of pass, some kind of ID. And it was even tried here during the whole COVID mess worldwide, and that was a big global. You watched the global community march in lockstep in every country, trying everything. That doesn't happen by accident.
You think that was a test?
Exactly, of course. Even here, I mean, I can remember when during the COVID restrictions that were tried here, Sobyanin, the mayor in Moscow, and his group came up with the idea of you had to have a permit to drive anywhere. You had to have a QR code that you could show. If cops stop you and you don't have it, you can be fined, taken off the streets, and he announced it's going to start on such and such a day. And, also we were supposed to stay inside of our apartments then, not walk out unless we were going to the store and that stuff. Well, I got up and I walked out and I thought, I want to see what's going to happen down on the highway here and see how different it is today, first day of the QR codes. And I walked down there. There was no difference at all. People were driving like crazy. I thought, there's no way in the world they all have a permit to drive. I love that about the Russians. Their attitude was, are you kidding me? I'm not going for this. Forget about it. And so it didn't work. But why did he have that control? He wanted the people to be controlled. It didn't work here, and I don't think it can work here now. And maybe in a lot of other countries it won't work either, because they tried it, and it was a failure in many places. And it was certainly a failure here. When he tried to use the same thing with restaurants, you can't go into a restaurant unless you had a QR code to let you in. The Russians said, forget it, I'm eating at home. And that lasted a week or 2 weeks, and the restaurants were losing business, and screamed to the mayor, and he said, okay, I give up. Never mind. And they got rid of it. Again, I appreciate that about the Russians. They don't trust that kind of government control, because they have a history of it. They saw what it's like and don't want to go back to that. But that's the goal, control, and that's the difference. I like that I live probably 4 minutes from one grocery store, 5 minutes from another one, 7 minutes from another one, 7 minutes to the post office, 7-minute walk here to the church, a 7-minute walk to the metro to get on and head downtown, down to the center of the city. That's wonderful. But I don't have someone standing there saying, show me your QR code before I let you onto the subway, onto the metro. Let me see that code. And let me check your social score. And this is going on in China. Let me check your social score to see whether or not you're allowed to travel. That's what they want in the 10 or 15-minute cities in the West. They want that kind of control. And that's the big difference between that and our 10-minute neighborhoods here.
Yeah, and even we have gated 10-minute neighborhoods as well with, you have to have a special pass to come in, but that special pass is a magnet. And sometimes we find out that there's a special code that can be used in every single one of those areas, which is quite interesting in this case. But, okay, so I do believe and I understand that the less religious a society is, the less kids they're going to have. There are other factors at play as well. And Russia is one of the countries that is currently suffering a crisis where we're not reproducing as much as we want to, or as much as we need to. Are there other factors besides not being religious enough as a society that cause the society not to reproduce as much?